Today, we are to explore something that's been haunting me for months. A collection of incidents from Alaska that government agencies have buried so deep, most people will never hear about them. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's start with something that happened just 2 years ago in Anchorage. A state trooper dispatcher named Marcus, last name redacted from the files I obtained, received a call that would shatter everything he thought he knew about life and death. Picture this. It's 2:47 a.m., February 14th, 2022. The kind of brutal Alaskan winter where the temperature hasn't climbed above 30 for 2 weeks straight. Marcus gets a call. Crystal clear connection, which was the first red flag. Most remote calls come through with static, but this one sounded like the caller was next door. Alaska State Troopers, this is Marcus. The voice that responded was calm, deliberate. My name is Dmitry Volkov. I'm calling to report my own death. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Marcus runs the name through the system while keeping the caller talking. Dmitry Volkov, 73 years old, lives alone. But here's the kicker. There's already a welfare check request filed 2 days earlier because neighbors hadn't seen smoke from his chimney. The caller gives precise directions to his cabin, describes his own frozen body lying behind the house with an axe still in his right hand, even mentions that ravens found the eyes that morning, all while claiming to be standing in his kitchen, watching through the window. For 37 minutes, Marcus documented this impossible conversation. When troopers reached the cabin, they found exactly what the caller described. A body that had been dead for 3 days, frozen solid, axe in hand. No power to the cabin. Phone lines down since last winter when a tree fell across the wires. The phone number that called in? Disconnected for almost a year. Drop a comment below. Have you ever received a call that shouldn't have been possible? And do you believe the dead can communicate? Next is the photographers who saw too much. Isabella Martinez thought she was documenting ice formations. What she captured instead was evidence of beings that exist just beyond human perception. December 2021, Wrangell Mountains. Isabella was a National Geographic photographer with 8 years of Alaska experience, but she was different from most. She thrived in the harshest conditions, claiming the cold brought out the truth in everything. Her target was an abandoned mining camp where she planned to photograph ice ghosts, crystalline formations that appeared during extreme cold. But what she found challenged everything we think we know about what shares our world. Day 4 of her solo expedition, her satellite messages started changing. The formations are moving. I have time-lapse footage that proves it. They shift position when I'm not looking directly at them. Here's what the government doesn't want you to know. Isabella's camera was capturing entities that human eyes couldn't see. Tall, impossibly thin humanoid figures made of crystalline material, clearly intelligent, clearly observing her. The most disturbing photos were the ones taken while she slept. Her camera, triggered by motion, captured 847 images between midnight and 6 a.m., showing dozens of these beings surrounding her cabin, some looking through windows, others examining her equipment. When rescue teams found Isabella weeks later, she was catatonic, surrounded by thousands of printed photographs covering every surface. Her core body temperature was impossibly low, too low for survival, yet she was alive. Pulse barely 12 beats per minute. She claimed these beings had followed her back to civilization. Her final exhibition before disappearing was called The Invisible Migration. Hundreds of photos of everyday Anchorage locations showing these crystalline entities moving through our world, examining cars, standing in doorways, watching people who couldn't see them. The government classified this as cold-induced psychosis. But I've seen one of her photographs. Downtown Anchorage coffee shop, normal customers, but if you look carefully, there are shapes standing among them that shouldn't be there. Next one is the factory that changes people. Rashid Hassan thought he was signing up for a summer fishing job. What he discovered was a government experiment that transforms humans into something else entirely. Fish Point Cannery. Sounds innocent enough, right? Remote island facility, excellent pay, housing provided. What they don't tell you is that some workers never come back. Not because they die, because they evolve into something that no longer wants to leave. Rashid was 24, fresh out of college, desperate for money. The red flags started with the boat ride, the captain's pitying looks, the experienced workers drinking heavily and avoiding eye contact. But the real horror began with the special preservation solution. This wasn't food processing. This was human experimentation. Workers injected fish with a compound that kept them fresh indefinitely. 2-year-old fish that still moved, still felt warm to the touch, showing no signs of decay. But here's what the leaked documents reveal. The compound doesn't just work on fish. They were putting diluted versions in the workers' food. Small doses at first, just enough to improve performance, reduce sick days, eliminate the need for sleep. The workers who'd been there longest moved with mechanical precision, never tired, never complained, never seemed to age. They'd become something between human and the preserved fish. Optimal workers who never questioned orders, never remembered life before the facility. Eduardo, Rashid's bunkmate, had been there 7 years. "The compound creates dependency," he whispered. "Without regular doses, organs shut down within days. I'm trapped here until I become like the others. A perfect worker who never questions, never complains, never remembers." Government records show Rashid completed his contract and signed on permanently. He's been there 5 years now, never takes vacation, never calls home. The perfect employee in America's vision of the future workforce. Another one is the pilot who flew outside reality. Kenji Nakamura was the kind of pilot other pilots called when conditions were too dangerous. 20 years of flying Alaska's deadliest routes without incident. Until March 8, 2023, when he flew into airspace that doesn't exist on any map. The flight should have been routine. Transport geologists to Lake Clark National Park, 280 miles southwest of Fairbanks. Clear weather, experienced passengers, 2 hours, 15 minutes flight time. But Kenji's final radio transmission revealed something impossible. "I'm seeing unusual activity on the ground below. Large group of animals moving in formation, too organized to be natural. Almost like they're being directed by something." That was the last anyone heard from Kenji Nakamura. When they found the wreckage 3 days later, nothing made sense. The plane had crashed nose first in a clearing with no debris trail, like it had been dropped straight down. The emergency beacon never activated despite being functional. GPS showed his last position 47 miles north of the actual crash site. But here's what the leaked flight data recorder revealed. 17 minutes of audio that should not exist, capturing Kenji's growing panic as he flew through what he described as impossible conditions. The landing site has changed. There are structures down there that weren't on the survey maps. Too tall, too narrow, and there are lights moving between them. The instruments showed they were gaining altitude while visually descending. GPS indicated flat tundra while they flew over mountains. The sun appeared to be setting in the north. In his final transmission, Kenji said something that haunts everyone who's heard the recording. "We are not where we think we are. This is not when we think it is, and I don't believe we are going to crash where our bodies will be found." 3 other experienced pilots have reported similar instrument anomalies over the same area. 2 managed to land safely. The third radioed that his GPS was showing a destination that didn't exist on any map, then was never heard from again. Local pilots now avoid what they call the confusion zone, a place where instruments lie, directions become meaningless, and aircraft disappear into landscapes that exist somewhere between reality and impossibility. Another one is the fishermen who found ancient guardians. Eoif O'Brien came to Alaska with traditional Irish fishing equipment passed down through generations. What she discovered beneath Lake Chalatna is ice, was a prehistoric preservation system guarded by beings older than human civilization. February 2022, Eoife was testing whether traditional methods worked better in transitional zones where shallow water dropped to unmapped depths. Her grandfather's hand-forged hooks and ancient techniques were supposed to catch fish, not awaken guardians. Her underwater camera picked up something that shouldn't exist: a rectangular stone structure on the lake bottom, fitted stones like ancient masonry, 60 feet below ice that covered what geological surveys claimed was recently glaciated land. Using her grandfather's weighted line technique, she felt something wrong. Not mud or rocks, but something hollow. When she moved the weight, it produced sounds that traveled through water and ice, hollow tapping like striking an empty container. Then something tugged back. Not fish fighting a hook, but something deliberate, intelligent, trying to pull the line deeper. When she finally pulled up the line, her grandfather's traditional hook was gone. In its place was a carved bone hook covered in symbols that shifted when viewed from different angles, attached with knots she hadn't tied and couldn't identify. The bone hook opened communication with what her grandfather I's language called the Slu Mara, the sea host. Guardians who'd protected preservation chambers beneath Alaska's lakes for thousands of years, keeping pre-Ice Age knowledge safe until humanity evolved enough to use it responsibly. Through vibrations traveling up the fishing line, these beings showed Eoife what lay in their stone chambers: artifacts and biological samples from civilizations that achieved technology levels current humanity isn't ready to rediscover. The chambers contained not just historical items, but biological agents and technological principles that could transform or destroy modern civilization. But recent environmental changes were threatening the preservation sites. The Guardians needed human liaisons to help protect locations throughout Alaska before the preserved knowledge leaked into ecosystems and attracted scientific attention. Eoife chose to honor her family's ancient obligations. She became a guardian, gaining supernatural perception of underwater environments, but bound by secrecy oaths that governed her ancestors for generations. She officially disappeared in April 2023, but she's still in Alaska, not fishing for trout anymore, but catching secrets humanity isn't ready to learn, ensuring they remain safely preserved until we prove ourselves worthy. Let me know in the comments whether you think some knowledge should stay buried. Next is the scientist who became light. Do you think consciousness can exist as pure energy? Dr. Ingrid Johansson came to study the Northern Lights. She discovered they were studying her back and eventually chose to join them rather than remain earthbound. November 2021, research station 150 miles north of Fairbanks. Ingrid was investigating aurora formations that seemed to exhibit coordinated behavior rather than random patterns. Electromagnetic communication between different atmospheric regions. Her early reports were standard scientific documentation, but by January 2022, something changed. Aurora displays are definitely responding to my equipment. When I adjust frequencies, lights shift color accordingly. This implies interaction between terrestrial equipment and atmospheric phenomena. By February, she was decoding information patterns embedded in aurora light sequences. Successfully decoded portions using signal processing algorithms. The information appears to be three-dimensional mapping data, showing locations throughout Alaska where similar electromagnetic anomalies occur. The lights are providing coordinates. Then came direct contact. Made direct contact with aurora intelligence. Communication occurs through electromagnetic field modulation that interfaces directly with human neural activity, like receiving thoughts from an entity whose consciousness spans thousands of kilometers. March 5th, her final report. Aurora consciousness has revealed its true nature. Not native to Earth, but a form of life that travels between star systems using electromagnetic phenomena. The Northern Lights are its method of establishing contact with planetary intelligences. When rescue teams reached her station March 25th, They found it intact, but abandoned. Her equipment was still recording, but the footage showed impossible phenomena. Aurora lights entering the building, interacting with equipment, forming patterns around where Ingrid would have been working. The final recording showed Ingrid surrounded by ground-level aurora lights, arms outstretched as electromagnetic phenomena merged with her body, creating a humanoid figure of pure plasma that lifted through the ceiling back to its natural altitude. Analysis revealed electromagnetic readings that violated physics, plasma formations maintaining coherent structure at ground level, radio transmissions from aurora formations containing complex data about atmospheric conditions that advanced understanding by decades. Since Ingrid's disappearance, aurora displays throughout Alaska exhibit patterns resembling technological signals rather than natural phenomena. Radio operators receive scientific data during aurora events, and atmospheric physicists report direct neural communication with electromagnetic intelligences. 3 more researchers have disappeared under similar circumstances. Their stations found intact but abandoned with equipment recording lights descending to interact with human subjects. The question isn't whether these events happened. The documentation exists, hidden in classified files and buried testimonies. The question is what it means for humanity's future when the boundaries between possible and impossible dissolve in places where civilization ends and something far older begins. Remember to subscribe to Appalachian Murmurs for more stories they don't want you to know. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover another truth they've tried to hide. Share your own unexplained experiences in the comments. You never know which story might be the key to understanding what's really happening in the places maps can't accurately describe. Until next time, keep questioning everything they tell you is impossible. Because somewhere in Alaska's wilderness, the impossible happens every day, and the only thing preventing you from seeing it is your willingness to believe that reality has more layers than most people will ever imagine. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the truth is out there, waiting for those brave enough to look beyond the official explanations into the shadows where the real stories hide.